Welcome to COP Conversations, Carbon Copy's special podcast series on the road to COP30. I'm your host, Anushka Mohite. Today, we are joined by Manjeev Singh Puri, India's former lead negotiator and one of the country's most seasoned diplomats. With his deep experience at the UN and in climate negotiations, he's the perfect person to help us unpack India's role at COP30. We'll explore India's key priorities, the risks and opportunities in its current strategy, how the $300 billion new collective quantified goal, or NCQG, could actually be realized, and what the absence of the US means for the negotiations. Hello, sir. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Anushka.
So, Mr. Puri, let me begin by asking you, the COP30 team was in India recently and you attended some sessions. What were the key takeaways, and did they signal any new priorities we should watch for going into COP30?
You know that the Brazilian top team was in India till yesterday, addressing various summits and meeting various people in the run-up to the Belem COP30. Something very interesting happened at one of the sessions where we were there. And that was, they had we have Dr. Arunabha Ghosh as the UN's special envoy for COP30 for South Asia. We had Jonathan Pershing, the similarly placed person for North America, somebody who has been a lead American negotiator and now is having to face the position. Very interestingly, both he and Andre De Logo, the COP president designate, had the following to say, worth listening. Look, the United States by itself has great abilities to act as a major disruptor. And that's something that we must understand. We must also understand that at the current juncture, the Europeans, who were always otherwise climate champions and countries which pushed a lot for climate change, today at the negotiations, in terms of willingness to do much, perhaps not much. Asking you, the global south, the emerging countries, China, let me leave out, they're almost not part of the global south, but asking all of us that you pitch in, especially the emerging countries, that's really the push there, which means those who are responsible, the entire CBDR thing is not just jettisoned, but being placed on its head. That's the crux of the issue at the moment. So, Anushka, again, to cut short everything very soon, in my opinion, this COP in Brazil is being held at a very seminal moment. Perhaps as important, if not more important, than 1992, when the UN FCCC was signed. Because in 1992, there were only negotiations of the minutiae, who will take what responsibility, etc. There was a green light that we wanted to do something for climate change. Now, the world's largest economy, the one responsible for the largest amount of emissions over time, and perhaps the most important for everything that we want to say, technology, money, etc., is actually turning its head not on the negotiations, but on climate change itself. And so, therefore, this is a particularly seminal issue. Now, many people tell me the climate change genie is out of the bottle. The world is moving towards doing whatever it can in its own manner on global warming. Companies are doing things, subnational entities are doing things. I completely agree. And I believe the climate genie is out. People will keep working as companies develop technologies to move away from fossil fuels. All of that will happen. But are multilateral negotiations which bring the whole world together unimportant? Can we really do all of this on a major global issue of this scale with existentialist potential as far as we are concerned? Can we all do it bilaterally, unilaterally, by ourselves? To my mind, the answer is no, which is why this process is particularly important. In a sense, I am happy that it's being held in Brazil, and I fully know the US-Brazil political contestation, which should not be undermined because that could be one of the factors for the US delegation acting disruptor, not just simply walking out of the Paris Agreement and staying relatively clear of the UN FCCC. No, but acting as disruptor. And that has lots of consequences. But Brazil is a very adept country at maneuvering and managing the diplomatic game. They have a very seasoned diplomat who has been appointed to be the COP president. They have excellent people. And I think, in my personal view, the greatest and most important thing is to keep the process alive, but not just alive, they keep the process going. We know to expect that there'd be great kicking, huge upward movements. I'm not sure about all of that, but keep it going.
So, India has often positioned itself as a voice for the global south. How would you describe its strategy at COP negotiations so far?
Of course, we are part of the global south. We stand for their priorities. We stand for all the things that they want. We stand for development. But Anushka, we also need to be mindful of one thing. We can't be members of the G20 and then a large number of the global south countries say, yes, yes, your per capita income is like ours, but you are such a large country, you play a very different role. So leadership is one thing, but the smaller countries, and they are the vast number in the game of climate change, now increasingly turn to the emerging countries, and India certainly among them, and they're pushing them that you also take action. And if I may put it very bluntly, not just adaptation and demand for money, but you take action on fossil fuels, greenhouse gas, the emissions and mitigation, etc. Things have changed. I think we need to recognize that it's no longer about the developed world as such on one side versus the developing world. The developed world, in a sense, is making calls with a vast number of the smaller countries in the global south, and it's the emerging economies in the global south which, in a sense, invariably find themselves, I wouldn't say in a corner, but having to defend a strong position for development. This doesn't mean we are not strongly with the global south. We are. We are with them. But, in some senses, our size, etc., makes it such that we need to work that much harder. So, India has consistently taken the position of leadership in the green world. Our Prime Minister went on, remember, at the time of the COP in Paris in 2015, everyone said India would be a naysayer. India was a yes-sayer. And India saw to it that the agreement came into place. We set up the Solar Alliance. In Glasgow, against everyone's thinking, we said net zero 2070, India takes a commitment. We have since perhaps been the only G20 country meeting its NDCs and doing better than that. We believe, because we think that taking green action is in our own interest, quite apart from being in the interest of the world. Green leadership is embedded for us, which is why we said we'll host the COP in 2028 here. We want to do it. So we have to make redoubled efforts. We need to stand with the global south, but of course, we also need to safeguard our own positions because we still have many miles to go towards the Viksit Bharat in 2047.
Right. So, sir, we saw at last year's COP the anger with which India reacted at the closing plenary regarding the processes that were followed. We also saw some of that at this year's Bonn conference. Are there any risks to this approach?
No, look, last year we did the right thing, that we caught up and called the COP presidency out, or rather the COP process out, for having, gone ahead with a figure which was, what should I say, paltry in terms of what the UNFCCC itself agreed upon. Remember, the very same document says the need is trillions, and then in a niggardly manner it agrees to trillions. So we were absolutely right in calling out. But do remember, Anushka, we let the process move forward. We did this in a manner that didn't block things from happening, even though it was a matter which was far from being satisfactory. Very important. So, we have to play this particular thing. We have to do leadership. We have to do it also by demonstration. But on the other hand, we have to remember that the people against whom we are making all these demands, they're just turning away and looking the other way. And so the demands get onto the table. Who's going to fulfill them? That's another particular aspect that we all need to be mindful of. So it's a delicate game, but I have no doubt about our leadership.
Right. And so looking ahead to COP30, what do you see as India's key priorities, and how can the country best position itself at the negotiations?
Anushka, for me, I don't know what the government's priorities will be, but I want to say that the greatest priority should be for the COP process to go forward. That should be the greatest priority. Despite possibilities, and I hope I'm wrong in this, despite possibilities of a great deal of disruptive action, and this disruptive action, not only because of the United States and their understanding of the US administration on climate change, whether it's drill, baby, drill, erase climate change from the government documents, don't support IPCC, don't support research. No, no, not only that. There are many people who are talking in terms of the COP has become a tamasha. We should do something about it. There's too much happening out here. There should be permanent negotiations. We should do voting and so on. These are not bad ideas. But if these ideas result in derailing the process, then at the end of the day, remember, for many years to come, multilateralism, which is an absolute essentiality for tackling global problems, would find itself at a dead end, which is not something that we in India, who need this particular process, it's important for us also in terms of our global role. What would we do? So this, in my opinion, would be the highest priority. Now coming to agenda items. Look, the COP presidency itself has said that while the Paris Agreement and the UNFCCC are documents for negotiations, let's focus on implementation. And we should stress on that. What can we do in terms of that? We are doing so in terms of demonstrating it. We're doing tremendous amount on other fuels, on renewables. Every single thing that you want, we are doing. We are putting our own money where our mouths are. We are doing all of this. What can we do in terms of getting the $300 billion onto the table in the real sense? Can we push for something to be done in a practical manner that will happen? It will benefit the global south, even if India gets nothing out of it. Will it benefit the global south? Good ideas we should push. Can we do something about technology and innovation? Good idea. But is the situation absolutely conducive to it? No. But let's keep working on all of these. And I believe being there, being a strong supporter of Brazil as it helms the COP would be particularly important. And that's the big role for India. Remember, we are today the fourth largest economy on our way to fifth largest economy on our way to becoming the fourth largest by the end of this year, the third largest. We are a country of consequence. As someone put it, we may not be able to solve global problems, but global problems can't get solved without us. We are important, and we will be there.
Yes. So we have spoken about the US's absence. Does it create chance for other nations like China and the BRICS bloc to take on a larger role? And how will it impact negotiating dynamics, particularly around climate finance?
So, Anushka, you use the word US's absence. In my opinion, if there is absence, that would be very good. At least the rest of the world can go forward. But remember, they pulled out of the Paris Agreement, not out of the UNFCCC. And so if the role remains disruptive, that's the key challenge. It's not that they opt out. Then the life will go on. We'll see after 3 years, 4 years what happens. But disruption, and they are not just by themselves. There are many others who are not like them, naysayers on climate change, but who have their own ideas that the process is not fast enough, etc., who tend to have this ability to add fuel to fire, even though that's not what they want. Now, yes, the world will turn around and tell the BRICS and tell the large emerging economies, do more. The Europeans will say, we are beset with national security. We are good. We want to do everything. But, you understand our problem. You please do something. Now, then we come into the entire question. Is climate change really a case for the global south to do by itself? And those who are responsible for it to look the other way? One says erasure and the other says I'm beset with other problems. No, that would be a travesty to the entire idea of climate justice, to the entire idea that the globe is in it together. And you can't just tell the global south, large countries, small, and I'm including China also in it, in all of that it's for you to do. This is without doubt going to be one of the most important elements where, in a sense, there has to be both offensive and defensive action at Belem. But hopefully we'll have the Brazilian presidency also playing the right strokes and being able to manage all of this.
What role do you see China play at COP30? Last year, it was, a bridge between the developed and the developing as we saw it in a way. So this year, what do you see? What role do you see for them?
So, Anushka, everybody says that the last several COPs have, in a sense, been handshakes between the United States and China. That's what people say about the Paris Agreement, and that's what everyone says. And that leaves some of us kind of left out in the scene. You remember Glasgow, the last minute, this thing about phase down and phase out of coal. and everybody pointing fingers to us when the Chinese and the US had just done a deal a few days earlier about simply saying face down, and they never spoke up. So this is realities of the world. They are going to be critically important. But for me, no matter our recent sets of relationship build-ups with them, etc., for me it is particularly important that leadership of the climate world does not move across, let's say, from the Western world to the Chinese. We have a role in it, and then that becomes particularly difficult to do. So we need to ensure that the Western world remains engaged, that the entire world remains engaged in it. We plug for the global south. We, in a sense, tell the Chinese a little bit away from the basic and the Chindia syndrome. We tell the Chinese, look, you're part of the developed world now. You do that, but we lead the developing world. That's important. It's a lot of dexterous diplomacy. At the end of the day, this isn't anymore, it never was a technical negotiation. It's the highest diplomatic negotiations on any subject. Anushka, let me remind you, other than the United Nations General Assembly, which meets every year and lots of heads of state and government go, heads of state and government don't go for anything other than summits. And the only UN meetings for which they were going, which were not centenary meetings or celebratory meetings, regularly have been the climate meetings. Remember, it is the power play of nations because it's about not about greenhouse gases. It's about energy use. And energy use is directly related to GDP, which is directly related to power. It's a power game of nations, which is why heads of state and government go there from all over, not just the developing world, but the developed world. That's the important, which needs to be understood quite clearly.
So you've mentioned the multilateral process, and I just wanted to understand, will the US's unreliability make multilateralism stronger in the long run?
Anushka, look, the United States has been one of the creators of the multilateral process as we know it now. Forget the League of Nations. The UN would not be located in New York, and neither would be the World Bank located in Washington if the US was not, in a sense, the mother or the father of this particular process. Pax Americana, in a sense, has led us over the last 80 years. Now, there is a certain change in their administration at the moment. Will it last beyond 3 years? I hope not. Multilateralism for India is particularly important. No matter what we talk about doing, bilateral deals, minilaterals, etc., they are important. But think about climate change, major global issue. You really want to leave it to the vagaries of individual companies and what they do, etc. Let me leave a simple thought with you. Let's look at AI, etc. And India is better placed than the vast number of the world. What does it look like being? The hegemony of a few companies based in California and possibly the Chinese giving them a run for it, and a little bit of the Russians. Where are the rest of them? Even the Europeans are missing. We need to ensure that there is multipolarity. It's important for us. The day we become the second largest economy in the world, we can think about other things. But till then, this is particularly important for us, that there is an element that everybody has a certain role to play. As I said, it's my belief global problems can't be solved by India, but global problems can't be solved without India.
So the 1.3 trillion Baku to Belem roadmap is ambitious, but is it too ambitious? And what are the gaps that will be need to be filled at COP30?
Anushka, look, you using the word ambition. There is no ambition. Baku was a low ambition outcome, but at least it pushed the process forward. Whatever criticism you may do. If the United States as a government, and please mark my words, the government in the United States matters. Companies, funds, the largest banks, even simple companies across the shelf in the US are walking away from ESG, from using the word green, etc. So if money from the largest economy in the world becomes scarce for climate action, if the Europeans say our money has got to be used for national security and so on and so forth, where's the money going to come? Now, I know in India, we all say we are a rich country. No, we're not. This is a completely different ballgame. We are a capital scarce economy. Are the Chinese in the position to provide some? Little bits, but not that. So, it is a very tough call. This is a time when, frankly speaking, we need to keep the ball rolling. I would be very happy if the numbers went up from 300 billion to 6 or whatever else you want. Anybody make some commitments, fine. But I hope those commitments are not made on the backs of India, China, etc. But also those who are really responsible, the big Western world. The World Bank itself if you noticed, is in a sense now peddling up employment, growth, etc., and not sustainability. They're making some small efforts in terms of junior capital, foreign exchange remittances, first loss damage, and so on and so forth. But all of that is on a limited scale because the world's largest economy at the governmental level is saying, no, this is not what we want to do.
So, sir, as a seasoned diplomat, how do you balance the need for public diplomacy and coalition building with the need for firm, closed door negotiations? And are we seeing more or less of each in recent COPs?
Look, there is absolutely no doubt that in each of these COPs, in each of these major decisions, you had to have public diplomacy and you had to have closed door behind the scene doing the deal. Let's take the case of Baku, the one that you mentioned. Do you think the figure of 300 billion would have got gavelled without something happening at the back? And what we did was public diplomacy. Look, there's nothing wrong in this. We should not conflate degree of our personal ethics and so on and so forth with what is done. This is as I said, it's a power game of nations. That's what is happening. So, you have to play the public game because you are in the public domain. We need to talk to our own people. We need to talk to the people in the world. They need to understand that we stand for good. After all, public opinion does matter, doesn't it? But at the end of the day, power plays a part of the game. And that requires backroom diplomacy, striking deals, compromises. Without that, do you think you can really go forward? We can talk in terms of voting. But Anushka, what will voting do? What happens if, say, 60% of the people say something, the others just look the other way? This is something on which you want a kind of consensus because you actually want people to change what they agree at the negotiation into implementation. In fact, let me again quote you back, Andre de Logo. The UNFCCC in the Paris Agreement provide frameworks for negotiation. Implementation is what we need to work on. And at Belem, can they simply say, little bit less of negotiations, let's pump on doing more? Can we collaborate? Can we do something? Let's do a little bit more in implementation. Perhaps it's time to take a little bit of a backseat from the negotiations and push on implementation because that's what the world needs. Look what's happening around us. We have flooding all around the place. Gurgaon, this great city coming up near us. There's 2 feet, 3 feet of water all over the place. Look what's happened in Punjab, what's happened even in Pakistan and so on. This is not absolutely new. The United States has seen unprecedented flooding. Everybody is seeing this particular thing. We need to come together because it's in our interest to come together and work on climate change. It's a reality.
So one of the things that we see, at COPs is there's a lot of narrative building happening before COP, even during COP. You use the word disruptor for the US. This word was sort of being used for India as well last year, especially when it spoke up. I just wanted to know for this year, how can India, change the narrative around, its negotiation strategy?
So, Anushka, you said last year, the New York Times carried a famous cartoon, and I'll send you a copy of that. Famous cartoon just before the Paris COP. It showed the COP process like a train, and the great Indian elephant sitting in front. That India was the great naysayer. That used to be the reference right through. And yet in Paris, what did we say? We will do it. And we didn't forget stopping anyone. We said we will do it, and we are doing it. Others are making more talk and less actual demonstration of action. Where are the Europeans? Pulling back in small numbers everywhere. The Americans simply say, we walk out. What can you do about it? India was not a naysayer in Baku. I think we should be very clear on that. India stood up for what the global south wanted, recognizing that you have to keep the ball rolling. Nobody is going to say India is going to be a naysayer. Those who will say it are themselves not just naysayers, but nay-doers. And so, therefore, they have to find some other scapegoat. But no, the people who matter, the global south who matters, knows that India stands for them and yet wants to keep the processes alive, things going, because we all need to live to fight another day.
Sir, India used its G20 presidency to push for MDB reforms. So can it use its clout to help unlock the 300 billion goal rather than just waiting for it?
Anushka, you are right. We need to work something on that count. Look, we did press MDB reforms, but things have changed because the most important economy in the world, the most important country in the world, it has different thoughts on these particular ideas, and they matter. I'm afraid they matter disproportionately. If you're located in Washington, D.C., you can keep saying whatever you want to, but that's the place which matters more than the 16.5% quota share that they have. These are facts and realities of life. Now, you remember this loss and damage fund when it was created at Sharm el Sheikh? Everybody was complaining, why did you let the World Bank be the karta dharta of that? But look, the reality is if you didn't agree to that, people let it go forward, they won't. What is better? I am a very firm believer that best is the enemy of anything. Let's get something going. Let's move forward and let's be on the track to it. Should we use anything to try and unlock funds? Yes. But remember, these funds, in the large measure, rests not with the MDBs, but their ability to raise the funds. And if those markets are looking the other way, it's a difficult call. But yes, I have no doubt in my mind, we should say, doesn't matter who's doing it. Let's have the funds raised. Let's try to find ways and means. If the MDBs, the World Bank, the European Investment Bank all need to be strengthened, please give it to them, because we in the developing world need these fundings in whatever form, because the need is immediate. Think about the vast number of countries in the global south facing the traversities, the huge amounts of challenges as a result of global warming. People need it. Look what's happened in Punjab now, in Pakistan, the floods. Everybody is not like the United States that you have resilience ability. Countries don't have that. We need to be in a position to help them. And that's important. We should work on that direction.
So that leads me to my last question. What is the one realistic, tangible outcome you believe can be achieved at COP30? And what would be deemed a win for the conference?
Look, for me, the most important thing would be to keep the process going and not let it be, let me say, tainted by disruption. Move it on, move it on. That's the most important element as far as I'm concerned. We will live to see another day, a better day, and doing much more. What the Brazilians will do, and that's what I think they are wanting to do, is to move things a little bit away from negotiations, a higher target, a doing more, but try and push things and make things out such that we can actually take action to implementation, do what we can in terms of resilience. Can we do something in terms of adaptation? That would be great. Let's do that much, because that's important. On the geopolitics, perhaps much more important. Keep this process alive, because we need it for the humanity, we need it for ourselves. All of us have vulnerabilities, but we need global cooperation.
Thank you, sir. That was Manjeev Singh Puri giving us a candid look at the stakes and strategies for COP30. If you found this podcast insightful, don't forget to subscribe to COP Conversations. We'll be back with more voices, perspectives, and analysis as the world heads to Belem for COP30.